Why is everything changing colors? Why is my watch changing? The hell is this? What happened to my Rolex?
You took too much, man. You took too much.
What is going on? These aren't the same pills. Who switched my pills? Okay, hi guys, and welcome to the show. Now, today I was supposed to post the review, the highly anticipated, long-awaited review of the Daniel Wellington by the right dishonourable Hugo Mountbatten. However, he is a complete sellout. He has no scruples whatsoever. I am held back by I guess this thing called morality and ethics. So yeah, I'm gonna do a follow-up on 5 reasons why I feel it's quite possibly one of the worst watches to buy on the market today. Now, before I get into it, I'll do a quick wristwatch check. I'm wearing my dear old subby, the Rolex Submariner ceramic, for a very specific reason, because for a later video you'll see, hopefully, fingers crossed, during this week. Okay, reason number 1.
It's a Wellington, named after the Duke of Wellington, obviously. The chap who beat old Boney. Battle of Waterloo.
Heritage. Now, Daniel Wellington was founded by Philip Tysander in 2011. What is very telling about the brand, Daniel Wellington, is that it was started and founded by a guy who studied business. Not art, not design, but business. The watch itself very much is a physical manifestation of marketing. There's no actual heritage to it whatsoever. Even the story behind it is kind of clickbait. If you see numerous articles on the company, the title is always something like, "This 31-year-old couldn't afford a Rolex, so he built a $180 million watch empire in the last 5 years." And that, I'm quoting Business Insider. And for me, it's a damning indictment of the times we live in, where a watch can merely be almost entirely hype. Unquestionably, we live in an age of superficiality, where image is everything and substance really doesn't mean all that much. In a way, we have to admire him for taking advantage of, and this is a great thing about the Daniel Wellington, it proves there is a demand, while the rest of the watch industry is still pointing fingers saying, the smartwatch and the failing demand of the Asian market, all the rest of it. Daniel Wellington proves that people are still willing to buy a timepiece, which at the end of the day, let's not forget, is considered a dated technology. In February 2017, Daniel Wellington was named the fastest growing company in Europe. The company made $230 million in revenue and $111.5 million in profit in 2016. The Swedish company has reported a 3-year growth of 4.6%. These numbers put the traditional watch industry to shame, and at the end of this video, we'll have a little look at why, in my opinion, the traditional watch industry has failed. So why was Daniel Wellington started? Well, according to Wikipedia, in 2006, when Tysander was backpacking in Australia, he met a traveller by the name of Daniel Wellington who was wearing a Rolex Submariner, and it happened to be on a classic NATO strap as well. The simplicity of the watch inspired Tysander to create his own watch brand and named it after the Englishman. So not exactly a world-changing heritage, especially when you compare it to brands in the same kind of price range like Timex and Swatch or Seiko, for example, all these prestigious brands that have all brought something new to not only watchmaking but horology in a wider sense of history.
I can't seem to get a grip on that blasted crown. It's too small. Ghastly thing.
So let's look at design. Now, this is probably my biggest issue with the watch, and well, I come from an art background, so you'll understand why in just a moment. So the design of the Daniel Wellington is sleek, simple, minimalist, and if we're honest, it's not bad taste. It's difficult to find this design offensive in any particular way. However, it has also been criticized as unimaginative and lazy. This is also true. So which is it, and why the negative criticism? Well, there is a real art to minimalism, even at an academic level. If we compare to the mathematical theory and pioneering design of Max Bill and the iconic Junghans collaboration, we begin to see how sleek and simple is actually an art form in itself. It takes real talent to understand and to do less is more right. And this is something that was perfected almost a century ago with the Bauhaus movement, the German modernism of Walter Gropius, and the subsequent innovators that he influenced, and the teaching of the Bauhaus school. There's simply too many designers and artists to go through, but bear in mind that this is nothing new. But what makes the Daniel Wellington especially damning in this regard is the fact that it's essentially of Swedish origin. Sweden and Scandinavian countries have a rich, long legacy of minimalist design. Sweden gave us the graphic design genius of Ander Beckman, the wonderful furniture of Bruno Matheson, the influential industrial design of Sexten Sassoon, the modern art of Hilma af Klint, etc. The list is endless. Just look at the success of IKEA, if we want something a little bit more mainstream, for example. I adore IKEA. I find most of their furniture very tastefully done. Does the Daniel Wellington honour this prestigious history? What new innovation has Daniel Wellington brought to the table? Good design fundamentally is all about balancing form and function in a stylish and interesting way. This watch is actually in reverse, where the minimalism is used to disguise the fact that no actual watchmaking, no craftsmanship, no innovative design, no thought has actually gone into it.
Made in the finest of sweatshops China has to offer.
Okay, let's discuss what quality you get. And let's not forget, at the retail price. And this is probably one of its most controversial areas. It is no secret that this watch is mass produced in China. It uses the cheapest materials and components available, and you really do feel it. Many watches, for the price of this, offer substantially better quality, in my opinion. Everything on this watch, from the plastic feeling low-grade leather strap, the quality of the steel itself, the gold plating is uneven, the extremely diminutive crown is far too undersized, making it quite tricky to operate. It feels clunky and imprecise. Even the engraving in the back, it's just laser etched the cheapest way possible. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that just because it's Chinese made, it's inherently bad quality. There's a big misconception about Chinese manufacturing, especially in the watch industry. There are many vastly differing levels to Chinese manufacturing. Some of my favorite watches are made in China at high-end, high-quality manufacturing facilities. In fact, most of the Swiss industry uses the same factories. These are unequivocally made at the very bottom of that manufacturing spectrum, and the result is immediately noticeable. But what makes things even worse is these same factories will make practically the identical watch and offer it on Alibaba, such sites like that, closer to its actual real value. So what does that say about the watch? Well, it says that most of the money goes towards branding, essentially. It shows that the company has not invested any extra money in the refinement or quality of the watch itself. So, yeah, not a good sign whatsoever.
Well, the performance of Daniel Wellington is far superior than this rather rudimentary Rolex.
When it comes to performance, this is actually the least damning attribute of the watch, and that's because obviously it has a quartz movement. Inside we have the most basic, affordable Miyota quartz movement available. And while yes, it does keep better time than the Rolex, of course it does, that argument is completely null and void, because that has been true since the quartz crisis of the early 70s. A battery-powered watch will always be more accurate. That is a given. But let's look at the other features of the watch. We have a mineral crystal and a snapback case, so it's not the most durable. Water resistance is only 30 meters. Not the end of the world, but again, it can be easily outdone by far superior watches at this price range. When it comes to comfort and wearing it on the wrist, as a dress watch, it actually wears very, very well. It's only 6 millimeters tall, which is perfect for sliding under the cuff. But this is completely undermined by its rather large, flat 41 millimeter diameter. And not to mention the fact that the strap does not taper whatsoever. The classic dress watches that Daniel Wellington is unsuccessfully trying to mimic stylistically is completely made void by the lack of these refinements. And ironically, it's these same attributes are the thing that has made it successful. In the long run, classic design is forever. This will merely fall out of favor as soon as the larger watch trend, recedes, and it's already starting to. Classic and iconic watches, no matter if it's a $10 Casio F91W or a 10 grand Patek Calatrava, these watches are classic forever. This, unfortunately, when it comes to its size, styling, and how it wears and performs on the wrist, is very much a fashion victim of its day. Trends come and go. Classic is forever. Now, don't get me wrong, if you have the larger wrist, then it's going to wear marvelously well. But for most people, once you see this on the wrist, you know it hasn't got the classicism of a those more traditional sizes, and I'm talking 33 millimeters to 39 millimeters of a traditional dress watch.
Well, the value's outstanding. As soon as I agreed to do this review, $50,000 just magically appeared.
When it comes to the value, it's certainly my biggest bone of contention I have with this watch. So we've already established that you're pretty much paying for the name on the dial more than anything you physically get with the watch. Now, there's always going to be an element of paying for the name with certain brands, right? But if we break it down mathematically, the ratio here is almost to an insulting level. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not against a brand making a profit. I mean, where would we be without profit in capitalism? It's essential. But this feels more like a scam than a fair transaction. The watch takes advantage of people that may not be aware of what else is out there. And, guys, have a look back at my previous videos where I looked at affordable alternatives in a similar style. And that video got an amazing response. And it actually got people into the hobby of, watches and the channel, which I'm eternally grateful. So there is some good things about this watch. But it's all about awareness. And what does that say about the wearer, that they're willing to spend so much on merely 2 words on a dial? A never-ending discussion, especially when we discuss luxury brands and whether they're worth it. But at least there has been some kind of craftsmanship. Anyway, I'm not going to go into that whole argument. That's a whole separate video.
Wear this at any black or white tie function and they'll all be in hysterics.
So in conclusion, Who is at fault here, and why has this watch become one of the most successful in recent years? Well, the traditional watch industry has failed to capture the attention of the would-be watch wearer. This proves that there still is demand for traditional watches without a shadow of a doubt. The watch industry itself has consistently and deliberately propagated the luxury watch myth. This started in an attempt to diversify themselves after the quartz crisis, because obviously making luxury watches, there's more of a profit in it. And unfortunately, the result is that most watches become unobtainable to most people. But this has a detrimental impact. The advertising that promotes this luxury aspirational thing, right, permeates outwards into the consumer via the advertising snobbery, and they segregate themselves in the established watch media by price point, and that alienates the new potential watch enthusiast. You know, they just see these watches and I can't afford that. That's not something I'm interested in. The established watch media itself has failed, being unrelatable, and also by being completely beholden to the watch companies that advertise in their publications or online media platforms. They too can only see so far. They're too busy trying to promote their own online watch stores or whatever it is, to spend time actually caring about the enthusiast out there. Daniel Wellington has mastered online social media. Companies like Daniel Wellington and Movement are able to engage with young people. Every single influencer that is relevant today has been sponsored by them. And if we compare to traditional watch brands who use a very outdated, almost last century tactics with ambassadors and holding swanky parties and stuff that simply, again, perpetuate this feeling of elitism and not really speaking to young people. But it's a two-way thing. The influencers, the style bloggers, they are also to blame. They have not communicated the importance, the art, the tradition, the craftsmanship, and to a wider sense, the wonderful history and legacy of horology, which, let's not forget, is a story that goes back to the dawn of human civilization. Watches is only a tiny part of that. The style bloggers have decided to take a quick buck over passing down a refinement that is essential, I think, to being a well-rounded individual. No matter if you're male or female or wherever you come from, everybody should be into watches. It's just as important as knowing how to tie a tie or how to polish your shoes correctly, or all the typical clickbait style advice you usually see on YouTube. Now, this is also a very interesting point that should be addressed, is that the watch community, the watch enthusiast community, is also partly to blame. The appalling amount of petty bourgeois snobbery, constant elitism, the bullying of newcomers. Everybody's got to start somewhere, right? The way some so-called connoisseurs, I would never call myself a connoisseur. It's so arrogant. But anyway, the so-called connoisseurs, the way they treat and talk down to people about watches, about something we all love, it's just disgusting. How are we meant to grow this passion? How are we meant to get people away from the Daniel Wellingtons and into some really great watches for the same money if we treat them badly? It's appalling. And lastly, the consumer, the buyer. They are also slightly at fault here because they're not researching enough. They're not looking around. They just go to the store, they go to Macy's and they pay these overinflated prices. It breaks my heart, it really does. But let's end on a positive note. And that is something I do deeply appreciate about the Daniel Wellington and a lot of fashion watches for that matter. It has brought people into this hobby, back into appreciating and loving and getting the enjoyment of this wonderfully enriching hobby. So anyway, guys, I'm going to leave it there. Let's share as many alternatives, affordable alternatives, in the comments below. Please do share your favorites. Thank you so much for watching. Please don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, found it useful, and as always, guys, I will catch you in the next one. Okay, ciao.
This is a public service reminder for the good Gentry. Please follow us on Instagram, join the Facebook UGWC group, and click on the bell to keep notified of new videos. Don't forget to keep it positive, keep it Gentry, onwards and upwards. Thank you.